quarters of that building was built in 1812 with Nutley brownstone. The old Newark courthouse was built in Nutley brownstone. Most of the row houses in Manhattan are Nutley, Belleville, brownstone. So that river gave us a big industry. But even the third river, which feeds into the Passaic River, gives us a lot of early industry. This was the site of an early pre-Revolutionary War set of mills, a grist mill, and the grist mill is for grinding grain and corn. It indicates that there was a large enough area of farms around here that somebody didn't have their own small mill to grind their stuff. People would come here to get their meal ground. There was also a log mill, a sawmill that was located before Greenland Avenue was here, just on the other side of what Greenland Avenue is now. They would make curbing, as did Kingsland Manor, for New York City out of wood, as well as homes here. I'm going to show you a picture here taken from the late 50s, early 60s of Vivian Ficus, one of the artists and teachers in town who designed the Nutley flag. And I'll just show you, so if you can show that half of the Nutley flag, while it's an odd flag in a lot of ways, along the bottom you see these three stripes. Very important part, it anchors everything. That in fact is the third river. There is the first river, there is the second river. The third river is ours, and so that actually has a prominent role in Nutley's flag. If you're ever in Town Hall, upstairs in the chambers, this is hanging on the wall there. That's the only place I've actually seen it. So what I've done is I've organized this tour around the river with a couple of stops with a couple of themes. The river, as I said, means different things to different people. It was industry to some people. It was a creative use to a group of artists that lived in not only in and around that house right there, but on Enclosure, which is the street right opposite here. It was a big artist colony. We're going to talk about what the river gave to those people as well. River is a natural boundary. And the third river played a very big role going all the way back to 1666 when Robert Treat purchased Newark. We were a part of Newark from 1666 all the way through to 1812. And the very point where Newark ended was where the third river winds up emptying into the Passaic. So we're going to talk about it as a natural boundary. We're going to talk about it as a home to Dutch immigrants. So the river is going to take on a couple of different faces, I think, as we walk along and stop at different stops. This stop here is river as industry. All right, so I mentioned that the third river, that the Passaic River allowed us to quarry deposits of sandstone there. But what the third river does, and the third river is running along here, it powered water mills. And if you can take a look at this map, which dates from 1792, the blue that you see here is the mud hole behind us with the big dam, and you can see that it is turning a water wheel when water would be released. So that worked, that grist mill that I mentioned here, and some of you might have heard of Captain Abram Spear, who's one of the Revolutionary War heroes associated with Nutley. He and his father owned this mill. We're going to meet Spear more intimately a couple of stops later, but again, they ran this in 1792, and the log mill, which was right across the way, until about 1812. So this map is from 1792. Certainly the mills existed prior to that. That's why they are certainly pre-Revolutionary War. In 1812, a guy named John Mason purchases all of this property and builds that brownstone, one of the great homes in Nutley, that brownstone there. So that's the Mason house. A lot of us who grew up here or who know Nutley from the 70s and the 80s know it as the Schaefer House. It was owned by Walter Schaefer from the 30s all the way through the 60s, but it's one of New York's, one of Nutley's great mansions, and it controls all of this property here. So we're no longer grist mill farming territory now. Now we have mills that are making shirts for people and blankets. So this has been now converted to a cotton mill. This road here has been named Calico Lane as a history of the fact that a fabric, calico, was made on this very site. So that was run by John Mason there. One of our biggest mills, we're going to visit a site of it later, it's near the Oval, was owned by the Duncan family, who comes from Scotland. After Mason sold the property, he sold it to the Duncans. The Duncans ran a textile mill here until there was a boiler explosion. The mill wound up falling down, and they moved upriver to where the Oval is now. We're going to look at a mill building there. So the Duncan family, who owned probably 6 or 7 mills throughout Nutley, the Duncan Essex Mills was the biggest, started their mills on this very spot here. Behind that tree, that pine tree right there, there's a house that's peeking through. You'll notice it the next time you're on Passaic Avenue. It's got a bow window that goes almost all the way down to the ground floor. That house dates from 1834. That was the house for the foreman of the Duncan Mill. So that's a very historic house in Nutley related to this property here. So this was the house that ran all of this stuff. In 1886, this was purchased by an individual named Joseph Hay. And Joseph Hay wound up digging underneath because the mud hole behind us here. So you see there's the Third River. Later on this tour, we're going to be walking in between the Third River on one side and the artificial waterway that feeds the mud hole here. Of course, this was man-made, the mud hole, and it was made so that you can control the water that would be released and return the wheels that would power the mill. Well, what Hay did was he also found another way to use water for industry. He found a stream located underground here that's got nothing to do with the Third River. He tapped into it, and where those playground bars are right now, almost exactly the outline of the wood that you see there, he wound up digging down, getting fresh water, and starting Nutley's first water supply. Up until about 1890 or so, people had either, you go to town hall and you fill your water bottle from that, but people also had their own individual wells if they were lucky enough. And it wasn't until about 1890 when Mr. Hay from this house tapped into that pond there, and maybe 400 or 500 houses along this area of Nutley got piped in water. It's one of the